Imagine you are lounging on the couch. Um, Maybe it's just a lazy Sunday afternoon, and you're just scrolling through your social media feed.
Yeah, we have all been there, just kind of mindlessly swiping.
Right. And you spot an interesting quote, like maybe a translated clip from a foreign politician's speech. Or maybe it's a piece of really thought-provoking, surrealist digital art. So you hit retweet.
It's just a casual, completely forgettable everyday click.
Exactly. But then, a few months later, you find plainclothes police in your living room. And suddenly, you're facing a criminal conviction and actual prison time. And it all traces back to that one specific tap on your screen.
I mean, the sheer disproportion between the action and the consequence is what makes this scenario so jarring.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It really is. We are looking at a situation that fundamentally forces us to reconsider the whole architecture of digital communication. And, well, how easily the boundaries of criminal law can be manipulated to basically police subjective thought.
And untangling that manipulation is our exact mission for this deep dive. We're unpacking a truly extraordinary stack of analytical documents today.
Yeah, and the methodology here is just fascinating.
Right, because what we have here isn't just, a standard legal brief drafted by a lawyer. Multiple highly advanced large language models. We're talking about ChatGPT, Copilot, DeepSeek, and Gemini. They were all fed this fascinating primary source.
It's a document known as a blood letter of accusation.
Yes, a blood letter of accusation and self-defense. And it was written entirely from a prison cell by a scholar named Dr. Chen Jingyuan.
The methodology alone is a milestone, honestly. These diverse AI models were tasked with independently cross-referencing this prisoner's handwritten account.
Like a digital legal team.
Exactly like that. They operated as this massive parallel processing team, checking his claims against domestic laws, constitutional guarantees, and even international human rights treaties.
And the consensus they reached is incredibly detailed. But it's probably worth pausing here for a second before we really get into the weeds.
Yeah, definitely a good idea.
Because we are dealing with highly sensitive, politically charged source materials today regarding the Chinese legal, political, and judicial systems.
Very complex stuff.
Right. So to be absolutely clear to you, the listener, our goal today isn't to take a political side or to endorse specific viewpoints or even independently validate the allegations in Dr. Chen's letter.
Right, we aren't fact-checking the underlying political claims.
Exactly. Our mission is just to look over the shoulder of these AI models. We want to impartially report and synthesize the fascinating legal and constitutional mechanics they uncovered in the text.
And that objective lens is so crucial here, because the AI models, well, they stripped away all the political noise.
We just looked at the code of the law.
Yes, they focus purely on the structural integrity of the legal arguments used against Dr. Chen. They analyzed how a single instance of online forwarding got escalated into this profound debate about the limits of state power.
And the misapplication of internal political discipline.
Right. And also this bizarre friction between local law enforcement and global diplomatic strategy. It is a lot to unpack.
Well, let's start with the actual charge hanging over Dr. Chen. According to the AI analysis of his letter, he was prosecuted under Article 293 of the Chinese criminal law.
Ah, yes. The charge for picking quarrels and provoking trouble.
Right. And the core evidence for this supposed crime was just his Twitter feed, specifically sharing opinions, art, and historical data.
And the models were unanimous here. They identified the legal foundation for this specific charge as incredibly fragile. I mean, Chinese jurisprudence requires 3 necessary pillars to establish this crime in an online context.
Okay, what are the pillars?
First, there must be fabricated, false information.
Okay, so fake news.
Right. Second, the defendant must possess a subjective intent to spread rumors. The law refers to this concept as mingzi, which means the clear knowledge that the information is false.
You have to know you are lying.
Exactly. And finally, the dissemination of this information has to result in serious public disorder.
Wait, I have a massive problem with that first pillar.
The false information part.
Yeah. If I retweet a surrealist painting or like a philosophical debate about history, those things don't have an objective true or false value. You cannot fact-check painting.
You really can't.
So how does a legal system classify subjective expression as fabricated information? It completely lacks falsifiability.
And the AI models zeroed in on that exact impossibility. Legally, the concept of falsifiability is the absolute bedrock of regulating misinformation.
Right, because if you can't prove it's false, it's just an opinion.
Exactly. If a statement cannot be proven objectively false, it cannot meet the statutory definition of a rumor. By classifying subjective art and academic debate as fake news, the prosecution basically removed the objective standard of truth from the equation entirely.
That is wild.
And it gets worse. The analysis of Dr. Chen's digital footprint showed he had almost no followers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his posts generated minimal engagement, so the models noted an absolute absence of evidence for the third pillar.
The serious public disorder.
Right. There was zero serious public disorder.
Okay, so let me get this straight. A prosecution is missing the objective false information pillar, and they are completely missing the public disorder pillar. How on earth did they prove his intent? Did they find messages of him, like, plotting to cause chaos?
No, not at all. The prosecutors actually just bypassed the burden of proving actual intent.
Wait, they just skipped it.
Basically, yeah. According to the AI breakdown, the prosecution substituted tangible evidence of intent with a demographic presumption.
What does that mean?
They argued that because Dr. Chen possesses a high degree, specifically a PhD, he inherently should have known better than to share this content.
You've got to be kidding me.
Nope. They replaced the rigorous legal requirement of proving malice with a subjective assumption based entirely on his educational background.
That is a terrifying legal precedent. You are substituting physical evidence with a demographic presumption. It sounds exactly like what legal scholars warn about when they describe a pocket crime.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Because imagine a fisherman with a giant, loosely woven net. He throws it into the water, and whatever he happens to drag up that day, like a boot, a tire, a fish, he retroactively decides is exactly what he was fishing for all along.
Yes, exactly.
When a law is stretched that far beyond its written intent, it violates that foundational concept of nullum crimen sine lege. No crime without law.
And the danger of a pocket crime isn't just that it catches unintended targets, it is that it fundamentally destabilizes a society's understanding of what is actually legal.
Because nobody knows where the line is anymore.
Right. The AI analysis flagged this as a severe systemic risk. When the judicial apparatus equates academic debate and emotional expression with criminal rumors, it crosses a very distinct line.
It goes from policing actions to policing thoughts.
Exactly. It transitions from regulating public order into the active criminalization of thought itself. It expands the perimeter of criminal law so far that the basic premise of legality just collapses.
Wow. Okay, but if the substantive legal arguments are this flimsy-like, if the charge itself is just a pocket crime completely devoid of evidence, how did they practically get him into a courtroom?
That's the procedural side of things.
Right, because the gap between a weak accusation and an actual prison sentence has to be bridged by law enforcement. The procedural execution must have been a total nightmare.
It was. The transition from substantive law to procedural execution is where the models uncovered the darkest elements of Dr. Chen's account.
What did they find?
The AI detailed an escalating series of severe procedural violations, starting right from the moment of his arrest. We are looking at a warrantless entry into his home by plainclothes police officers.
No warrant at all.
None mentioned in his defense. And this was followed by a failure to notify his family of his detention within the legally mandated 24-hour window.
So they effectively just disappeared him into the system.
Yes, exactly.
And the letter mentions the interrogation tactics were incredibly aggressive once they had him isolated.
Right. It's very aggressive. The AI models extracted accounts of prolonged 24-hour interrogations accompanied by severe physical and psychological abuse.
Oh, man.
This included the deliberate denial of food, water, and access to a bathroom. And this was specifically utilized as a coercive tactic to extract the passwords to his digital devices.
Okay, this is where the concept of the fruit of the poisonous tree in evidence law completely undermines the prosecution, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the soil is contaminated, if law enforcement breaks into a house without a warrant and uses starvation tactics to extract passwords, then every single piece of evidence that grows on that tree is legally toxic.
Yep, the whole tree is infected.
Every screenshot they take using that extracted password, every resulting verdict is poisoned by the method they used to obtain it.
And the AI analysis mapped those specific toxic fruits directly to constitutional and international frameworks.
Which ones?
Well, the model cited explicit violations of the Chinese Constitution itself, specifically Article 37, which guarantees the inviolability of personal liberty, and Article 35, which protects freedom of speech.
So they are breaking their own foundational law.
Exactly. Furthermore, they cross-reference the interrogation tactics against the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
Which both prohibit that kind of treatment.
Right. Both strictly prohibit arbitrary detention and cruel or degrading treatment.
What really jumps out from the AI summaries,
Hmm.
um, there is this specific phrase, they call it the judicial mafia. It suggests this wasn't just, one rogue detective taking things too far.
Yeah, that term is heavy. The models use that term to encapsulate a systemic structural failure. I mean, in a healthy judicial system, the police, the prosecutors, and the judges act as independent checks and balances on one another.
Right, they hold each other accountable.
But the judicial mafia concept describes a coordinated, collusive effort where these three branches operate in concert to push a predetermined outcome.
So the fix is in from the start.
Basically. The AI analysis even noted that the level of collusion alleged in Dr. Chen's letter mimics the behavior of an organized syndicate subverting the justice system, which theoretically could actually trigger scrutiny under China's own anti-organized crime law.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
You know what blows my mind about this coordinated effort? It's the bizarre justification they used to rationalize their actions in the first place.
You mean the slogans?
Yes. The documents mention that during these interrogations, law enforcement officers were scolding Dr. Chen with these very specific political slogans. They repeatedly accused him of eating the party's food, smashing the party's pot.
Yeah, that phrase is a deeply entrenched ideological idiom. It basically implies that someone is enjoying the benefits provided by the state or the party while simultaneously undermining or attacking it.
So it's a demand for loyalty.
Yes, an internal demand for strict, unwavering political loyalty. But the AI models uncovered a glaring foundational irony in the application of this slogan here.
Which is?
Dr. Chen is not a member of the Chinese Communist Party.
Wait, okay, let me make sure I am fully grasping the absurdity of this.
Go ahead.
He is a civilian, completely outside of the party, but he is being judged and scolded by their internal disciplinary rules.
That is exactly what happened.
That is like a private, exclusive country club trying to enforce its strict, formal dress code on a random guy who is just walking his dog down the public sidewalk outside.
That is a perfect way to put it.
I mean, you cannot legally penalize someone for breaking the bylaws of an organization they never even joined.
The country club analogy perfectly illustrates the overreach. The AI analysis points out that CCP internal disciplinary regulations apply exclusively to official party members.
Right.
When law enforcement officers apply these internal ideological standards to a non-party citizen within the context of a criminal investigation, it represents a gross overreach of state power.
Because it blurs the lines.
It dangerously blends internal political discipline with external criminal law, and that completely violates the constitutional principle that all citizens are equal before the law, regardless of their political affiliation.
It totally turns a legal framework into just like an ideological purity test. But why do it? Why would local police bother using an internal party slogan on a civilian who just retweeted some art?
The AI models contextualize this behavior through a modern Chinese political phenomenon. It's known as low-level red, high-level black.
Okay, tell me about that.
It is a fascinating look into the incentive structures of local bureaucracies. Basically, grassroots enforcers operate under immense pressure to demonstrate visible, performative loyalty to the central authority for their own career advancement.
Ah, so the low-level red is the local officials just going wildly overboard to prove how dedicated they are to the cause.
Exactly.
They want a gold star from the boss, so they manufacture a massive political achievement by locking up a dissenting voice, even if they have to completely stretch the law to do it.
Precisely. The low-level red represents these overly simplistic, aggressive, and often vulgar displays of loyalty, but the consequence of these actions is the high-level black.
Which means what, exactly?
Well, by blatantly violating procedural justice, constitutional rights, and basic logic to secure this conviction, these local enforcers generate a fake, toxic loyalty. And that ultimately smears and damages the reputation of the very institution they claim to be protecting.
Oh, I see. So the overzealous local action creates a massive liability for the national government.
Exactly.
And that high-level black liability doesn't just stay within the country's borders, right? This local performative loyalty actually creates massive contradictions on the global stage.
Huge contradictions.
I want to look closely at the specific content Dr. Chen was actually retweeting, because it wasn't just art. The source documents mention he was sharing posts from foreign scholars and even a translated speech by former U.S. President Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the AI analyses highlighted Dr. Chen's defense strategy here, which was brilliant. He elevated his individual case to expose a glaring disconnect between grassroots enforcement and overarching global strategy. By prosecuting a citizen criminally for the simple act of retweeting the public, widely available speech of a foreign head of state, the local police directly contradicted major publicized national policies.
Right, because the national government is actively promoting initiatives like the community with a shared future for mankind.
Yes.
And you can't have a massive diplomatic platform centered around cultural exchange, mutual learning between civilizations, and open dialogue, while simultaneously allowing your local police to classify a foreign president's speech as a punishable criminal rumor.
The diplomatic friction generated by this contradiction is immense. The AI models noted that when local courts act this way, it severely undermines the national government's attempt to project a tolerant, lawful, and open image internationally.
It makes them look incredibly hypocritical.
It does. It also directly violates the stated domestic policy of comprehensive law-based governance. That policy promises the international community that the domestic legal system is built on evidence, procedural fairness, and predictability.
It essentially looks like local police stations are accidentally writing catastrophic foreign policy.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, if I'm an international diplomat or a foreign academic, and I see that a citizen is going to prison just for reading my public statements, it destroys any trust I have in that country's commitment to open exchange.
And the models identified the specific outcome as a profound, chilling effect on domestic academia and international relations.
A chilling effect.
Right. If a researcher or policy analyst cannot read, quote, or debate foreign political thought without risking a prison sentence under the vague guise of picking quarrels, then genuine academic research is simply paralyzed.
Because nobody wants to take the risk.
Exactly. The state is effectively blinded because its own scholars are too terrified to actually analyze the outside world.
Wow. Let's pull all these threads together because this has been a journey. We started with a casual, everyday social media retweet. And from there, we watched the boundary between objective legal fact and subjective political opinion completely evaporate under the weight of a pocket crime.
Yep, the whole concept of falsifiability just thrown out the window.
Right. And then we explored the mechanics of a systemic procedural collapse, from warrantless arrests to the legal toxicity of extracting passwords through sleep deprivation and starvation.
The fruit of the poisonous tree.
Exactly. We unpacked the profound irony of the country club rules, where local enforcers violated their own party discipline in a desperate bid for performative loyalty. And finally, we saw how that local zealotry acts as diplomatic sabotage, basically embarrassing the national government on the world stage.
When the components are laid out structurally like this, it serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of legal definitions.
It really does.
When the statutory definition of a rumor becomes boundless, and when a defendant's subjective intent is presumed based on their education rather than proven with actual evidence, the law ceases to function as a protective shield for the citizen.
It just morphs entirely into an arbitrary weapon for the state. Which brings this entire deep dive right back to you, the listener. Because regardless of where you live, we all generate a digital footprint. We all retweet, share, and comment on the world around us.
It's just how we communicate now.
Right. And the mechanics of legal overreach follow incredibly similar, predictable patterns across different jurisdictions. This case is a visceral reminder of how vital procedural justice and strict, falsifiable legal definitions are to anyone, anywhere.
Absolutely.
Because without the strict requirement of evidence and procedure, your digital footprint transforms from a timeline of your life into an infinite legal liability.
The vulnerability transcends international borders. The erosion of procedural safeguards always begins by stretching the definitions of existing laws to target unpopular or inconvenient speech.
It's a slippery slope. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a brand new concept to mull over. Something that genuinely stuck with me as we were reviewing the methodology behind today's deep dive.
Yeah, the methodology itself is almost as interesting as the case.
It really is.
Yeah.
Consider the very nature of how we uncovered these insights. A prisoner, sitting in a cell, handwrites a complex letter of self-defense. That raw, human document is then ingested by a array of highly advanced large language models.
And within seconds, these AIs cross-referenced his claims against the Chinese Constitution, international human rights treaties, and internal party regulations.
Exactly. The models function as this encyclopedic, flawless legal scholar, and they were completely unburdened by local political pressure or the bureaucratic need to demonstrate loyalty.
They just read the code of the law and found the bugs.
I love that phrasing. They read the code of the law and found the bugs. So as AI technology continues to rapidly evolve, could artificial intelligence eventually serve as the ultimate objective auditor of legal justice?
That is a fascinating thought experiment.
Right. Imagine a tireless, incorruptible entity operating in the background of a judicial system, capable of instantly identifying judicial overreach, pointing out procedural rot, and flagging human rights violations the very moment a flawed, contradictory verdict is drafted.
It completely flips the narrative on AI. We so often fear artificial intelligence as this ultimate tool for state surveillance and control, but applied this way, it could actually become the ultimate safeguard for transparency and human rights.
It's something to think about next time you see, like, a jagged white line on a medical x-ray. We expect the practice of medicine to be a clean binary. The bone is either broken or it's not, and the machine shows us the objective truth.
Right.
We hope the law is just as clean and objective. But when the diagnostic machine of human justice starts getting murky, heavily influenced by politics and ambition, well, maybe we need a new kind of artificial machine to read the results and keep us honest. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.